All right, we are digging for wisdom once again. It's week 9. Dixie, there's 3 weeks left. We got to start playoff positioning, although as we'll see throughout the podcast, most of these positions have already been playoff positioned. We've already figured out a lot of these
playoff position. That almost sounds like a different podcast, Ward. I don't know what you're trying to do to us here in this playoff positioned podcast. But you are correct. And I'm actually a little disappointed, Ward, because when you really look through it, I mean, a lot of it, it's done. I mean, a lot of it is almost statistically impossible. I mean, there are some crazy scenarios, and probably one a year hits where, all of a sudden Irving beats Lake Highlands or something, and you're like, I didn't consider that kind of idea. We've got some winners and losers, and we, like all of a sudden Granbury beats Aledo, and you're like, what's going on? I mean, these things never happen, but every now and then it happens somewhere. Like last week, Halton beat Arlington Martin.
Yes.
What am I going to do with this, Ward? I that blows my brain all of a sudden,
And the first thing I thought, not to get off track, the first thing I thought of when I saw that score is that you're going to the store to grab a shovel for Martin, even though they're way far away from getting a shovel. But it's one thing to lose to Halton, but to give up 56 points, mother, that is crazy. Anyway, get back to your point. That's one of the glaring things that we saw in week 8 for sure.
Right. And that's just the big point, is that when you really start looking at a lot of these playoff races, and as we're going through the games, we'll kind of break them down a little bit more. A lot of these playoff districts are pretty much, you got your playoff teams. There might be a fourth place team that is still up for grabs, but really wholesale wise, there's really not any kind of big question marks that we have. So I think we're almost getting to the point where playoff projections are starting to settle in, Ward. But we live in a world, Ward. It is, let's see here. It is October 23rd when this is going out. October 23rd. Yeah. I'm checking my watch in the future. It's like Back to the Future watch. And Plano East is 6-1.
6-1. They're almost as good as that basketball team, except for that one. You could have just said 6 and something else. That would have been something else. Yeah, they're playing. They're playing football, and we're going to discuss it a little later this week. I mean, they can all but punch their ticket because they own the tiebreak over Rock Hill. If they beat Plano, they'll own that tiebreaker. I mean, what's going to hold them back from the postseason? Some complete collapses against who? I mean, they're playing Alley and McKinney. They aren't expected to win those, so they're in. All right, well, we're jumping ahead. We're jumping ahead. You know who else is in? Duncanville's in, and they're in with all kinds of, pats on the back and glory again because, man, we were wondering about North Crowley. We were wondering about DeSoto. Even down in the Houston area, maybe North Shore and Atascocita's come. Well, Atascocita's not coming up because they barely won by 1 point over a team they're favored by 3 touchdowns over. But still, here we are with Duncanville just doing what they do.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen on a couple of different rankings. I think the Morning News had North Crowley over Duncanville at one point, and maybe even Dave Campbell's did a little bit after that game where Duncanville didn't look incredible in that whoever Maryland team they were playing. But all of a sudden, now we've got 2 very specific data points. They've played Lancaster and they played DeSoto. Those were 1-score games for North Crowley. For Duncanville, they were 3 and 5 score games. Duncanville is just dominating. For whatever reason, it might be an intimidation thing, Ward. It might be just the way they play, the style of football they play, but it's like they're up 21-0 when they get into any game. It's like the teams just don't want to play them and kind of buckle down. But North Crowley doesn't have quite that intimidation factor. So everybody is like, oh, North Crowley's really good, but we're going to fight them a little bit more. But Duncanville, even the good teams, even the Lancasters and the DeSotos, they come in there and all of a sudden they're like, we don't want any of this, Ward. We don't want any of it. Right. Duncanville, for me now, is a clear number 1 in the area, the clear number 1 in the state. I mean, just go ahead and shine off their crown, Ward, because it's looking like another Duncanville State Championship.
Exactly. And one of the most memorable thoughts of state championship was when Reginald Samples played in that game with North Shore, and they lost on the Hail Mary, and they kept that camera on him with that dumbfounded look on his face like this can't be happening. I don't think that face is going to be – they better hold on to that picture because I don't think that's coming out again for quite some time. I mean, it's gotten to the point, and I'm remembering last year, it's gotten to the point now where teams just go ballistic when they start off decent against them. I remember they played Skyline, Keelan Russell threw an interception in the first drive, and Skyline's just going nuts. All kinds of dancing on the sidelines, and then they lose 40-7. Same with Heath. They pick up a DeCorian Moore fumble and take it back for a touchdown. They're up 7-0. Here we go. Rodney Rev has really turned this thing around, and we're going to upset Duncanville, and they lose 56-7. You got to find the smallest things to celebrate when you're playing Duncanville for a good, 98% of the state. The other ones really feel like they can compete, and Duncanville has to put them back down again.
And they have, and the way they're going through this district, which is a really, really good district. I think we're probably going to see 3 of the 4 teams, if not all 4 teams, playing in week 4, maybe having rematches because they're really good teams. And Duncanville is just wiping the mat with them.
Well, as Duncanville soars to their playoff run, their 6-game playoff run, other teams are not going to make it. And when they don't make it this early, they get the shovel when they're expected to do things. Who's getting the shovel this week?
Well, we're talking about Duncanville, which means we're at 11-6A. And while we're talking about 11-6A, Cedar Hill, oh, man, they got the shovel already. It's October 20th. We live in a world war. Think about this. We're Plano East, a 6-1. And
Right.
Cedar Hill, a state-ranked team, we're given at one point in the season, we're given the shovel. We're just like, they're done. They have no chance. We're at a point where statistically, if they beat Duncanville and DeSoto, I don't even think they have a chance because they would be losing so many tiebreakers to Lancaster and Waxahachie that they're still done. Ward, the shovel in Cedar Hill.
Time to start putting some dirt. Start putting some dirt on them. And we had them penciled in at 3.
We had them penciled in at 3. That's why we did. That's why we don't use pin anymore.
Everybody had them penciled at 3. Exactly. The Sharpie's been taken from us. We only use pencil and number 2 pencil 2 in case they throw a Scantron test at us. I know the kids are like, Scantron. Well, they have no clue what they're talking about. Who else gets a shovel?
And Cedar Hill was a team that went 4 deep last year, Ward. How about a team that went 5 deep? We're talking October. Middle of October. It's not even Halloween. Plano East is still 6-1. Things haven't changed since the 3 times I've mentioned it before that. But Frisco Emerson, my team that always does what I tell them to do in my picks. Well, they've been losing like I've been telling them to do too, unfortunately. And now they're done. They're done. They have 1 game left against Melissa. I don't even think if they win that game, they're done.
They'd have to play the tiebreaker game and figure it out. Flip
and they don't win any of them.
Right. Oh my goodness.
I mean, at this point, we're needing Frisco Independence to be, Prosper Walnut Grove twice or something. I mean, they're done. And the way they played against Lovejoy this past week, I mean, at least their other games were competitive. 48-7, Ward. That's a team that said they want to go down to the grave. We're done. We're done.
Go ahead. They're laying back saying,
we're playing the casket match. Let's just look up and do that. And what I'm worried about with Emerson, Ward, it kind of gives me those Frisco Liberty vibes from a couple of years ago. I mean, we talked about this quite a bit, where I don't know that Emerson's going to be good next year either. It's not like, Cedar Hill, we can at least have a conversation. Maybe they reload. Maybe they get back in there. Maybe Lancaster graduates heavy and they're back in the mix of things. But for Frisco Emerson, I'm looking at that district and thinking, it might be it for Frisco Emerson.
Yeah, because there's 2 distinctive tiers there, and they're wavering in the middle. The last thing you want to do is go into a year and have Diggs put you on that other tier. Then you're like, oh, goodness, how am I going to get out of this mess? All right, well, let's flip it. Who's getting flowers? Because if we start with the negative, we'll go to the positive. I usually don't do that. Let's hit the negative.
It's a sandwich approach.
Exactly.
It's like in our annual review when you're just yelling at me for an hour, and then you're like, "We really appreciate you, Diggs. I hope you come back next year." After I get verbally abused by you for an hour, just beating me up.
I strike your head. Go ahead.
If we had graphics last week, we have some graphics. It said Midlothian Heritage 3-3 versus Crandall 6-0, and you're looking at that going, okay, what's Crandall going to do? Is this going to be the rise of Crandall? Midlothian Heritage hangs a half 100 on Crandall and beats them by 53. Ward.
Listen, my man Ted Madden shot that game. He works at Crandall ISD, and he was asking me at halftime, can I please go home? Can I please go home? I don't want to see this anymore. And I was like, go home, brother. It's a wrap. What happened? They're They don't get no flowers, but Midlothian Heritage does. Why do they get a shovel? Oh, because they're 6-1. That's why.
No shovels, but flowers from Midlothian Heritage. At the beginning of the year, remember when Stephenville beat them like that? We were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
uh-oh. We weren't feeling good about Midlothian Heritage. And then Argyle, that game was non-competitive. But it looks like, Ward, they figured it out. They needed a bouquet of flowers, and let's give it to them. And
That's
even
nice.
against Terrell, that was a one-score game. So the way they beat Crandall was just completely unexpected. That district flipped upside on the head. Remember, Poteet only lost to Kaufman by one this week.
Right,
So now
right.
all of a sudden, and we'll talk about it a little bit more detail, I think Mesquite Poteet has a fighter's chance of making the playoffs.
And
And
they
I know
hadn't
that's
won
a
in God knows
great
how
day.
long. Yeah, exactly. They hadn't won in so long. All right, who else is getting? Because we talked about Hold'em. Are they going to get some
Talked
flowers?
about Halton. They're going to get the flowers,
There we go.
beating Arlington Martin 56-49. Ward, we have, well, I'm not going to say you because you're a very nice guy. You're very
Right.
diplomatic, but I have not given Haltom a benefit of the doubt on this podcast from campfire to now. I'm just like, oh, they're not making the playoffs, Ward. They are a second tier team right behind all these other schools. And there's a point, Ward, where I was telling you maybe Arlington Sam Houston, Ward, maybe Arlington Sam Houston
Right.
jumps in there. And Haltom just they went and bought a shovel and they just smacked me upside the head and said, well, we're not taking the shovel, but we're going to give you the shovel,
We're going to
Diggs.
give you one.
So to that end, April showers bring May flowers. Haltom,
They could get
and
in
I
there,
still
right?
think in the back of my head, Ward, it's very disrespectful. I'm like, they're going to lose some sort of tiebreaker. Like, Arlington Martin's not going to miss the playoffs. Surely, Ward, Arlington Martin is not going to miss the playoffs. They're going to beat South Grand Prairie, and South Grand Prairie is going to beat Haltom, and we're going to get some three-way tiebreaker or something. Surely that's not going to happen. But Haltom, get some flowers
Haltom's
for
sitting
me.
there
That
at
was an
3-1
impressive
right now.
win.
Right now. Don't call me
And the
Shirley.
ghost of Jackson Verowit cries one more time as Frisco Wakeland scores 14 unanswered points to overcome a 13-point fourth quarter deficit, which pretty much shuts down 5-5A. Frisco Wakeland, I keep doubting. I'm like, I've watched them in person, Ward. It's not like I'm just doing
Right.
analytics on this. I watched them just get destroyed by McKinney North, where it just looks like they have nothing going on. They've had a couple of just performances where they get like 50 yards, and you're like, what can Frisco Wakeland do? But when it mattered in the fourth quarter, in the darkest hours, Ward, Optimus Prime, he went like this, and all of a sudden, you've got the power kind of played, and they transformed, and all of a sudden, Frisco Wakeland goes from the shovel to the flower bed.
To the flowers. And we done with shovels, but we should throw a shovel at my man Jackson. He had Frisco winning the district, and now they're not even in this joint. We shouldn't laugh at the guy. He's just being a hometown favorite. I'm sure you would say Plain Luis is going to win 6-6A at the beginning of the year.
I mean, we
If you
have a
wanted no
podcast
respect.
where I gave my official prediction, and it was not Plano East was going to
Okay.
win
That's true.
District
You would have
6-6A.
lost all your respect. What are the flowers we got?
Two lower tier teams that we want to give love on because there is no team left behind on the dump and there's no team left behind on digging for wisdom. Thomas Jefferson with a district win, as well as South Garland with their first. I'm calling it their first district win in 10 years because they did win a game in COVID where they only had like two district games and they played like North Garland and who knows. I don't even know what that game was. They
They played
won. It's
somebody.
official. It's in Max. We're not going to count that. Their first district win since 2014 in a legitimate full season. South Garland and Thomas Jefferson for breaking district losing streaks. Flowers.
Congratulations to those two, especially TJ. I caught them playing several years ago over at Lowe's Field, and they were playing WTY, and it was a struggle for them to even get fans to come out here. And to hear they finally got some win, to get a win here and get some Diggs flowers, that's right there. That's enough to get you through to the next season. You personally, by giving them these flowers, may have gotten 3 more kids to participate in football the next year because they're tired of nobody giving them nothing. But if they're here, they're getting some flowers from Diggs. I'll play
We
football.
see you, South Garland. We see you, Thomas Jefferson.
There you go.
We appreciate
Right.
you. I watched that South Garland game. I could have
You were
gone to
there.
a ranked 5A game between Colleyville Heritage and Arlington Seguin, but I was like, nope, I'm sticking with this game. I'm supporting it. It was a quality entertainment thing. And you were there with me at Seguin and Colleyville Heritage. That was not, in the
No,
second
it
half
wasn't.
anyway, that was not a quality entertainment game. But South Garland, North Garland to the very end. North Garland's got some talent. Juju Minor is a name that you need to keep an eye on, Ward, for maybe a bobblehead next year if he continues on his path. But South Garland, impressed.
Impressed with it. All right. Well, let's get into some games this week. You ready?
I'm
Where do
ready.
we start? We always start at the same place. 3-6A. Let's get it started. Let's get started with Crowley and Mansfield Legacy. You've mentioned the last 2 weeks, Crowley's got this thing turned around. They're kind of cooking with some grease. They're ready to play. Are they ready to play against Mansfield Legacy? Talk to me.
Probably it's up and down, Ward. It's a little bit weird because I would have expected them to beat Mansfield Lake Ridge a lot more than they did. That game was just a very pedestrian 27-7 game. Mansfield Legacy played Mansfield very well, just like we talked about last week, Ward. I gave you a spoiler. I gave you a 1 week ahead. I was like, here's what's going to happen on Friday. I told you Mansfield Legacy was going to play Mansfield tight, but they were going to lose. So now is Crowley still consistently more closer to that North Crowley tier, or are they closer to this middle tier? This game doesn't matter for playoffs, but I think it does matter for just momentum going into the playoffs. I think Crowley needs to win, but again, I got to get the style points. I'm not trusting Crowley after losing to Tyler Legacy and Skyline earlier. So this is a chance for them to earn some more style points. They got it against Mansfield, but then they lost them again against Lake Ridge. So, it's like Mansfield on, Mansfield off. Is this going to be Mansfield on? We'll find out. I like
We'll have
Crowley,
to
but
figure it out.
got to show me something.
Well, in this district, the playoffs are just about set. Talk to me about that. What is that 1% that's not set? What's the wild scenario that has to happen for you
I
not to
mean,
have this thing set up?
to me, Legacy could beat Crowley. Then all of a sudden, if the Legacy can beat, win one more, maybe we get a tiebreaker. Maybe Legacy's able to jump over Crowley still, get a three-way tie with Crowley, Mansfield, and Legacy. But I'd say this is 99%. I mean, it's going to take like North Crowley losing a game or something. We could never say never. That's probably not going to happen. 99% likely not going to happen. But I think your four teams are going to be Mansfield Legacy, Mansfield, Crowley, and North Crowley, which somebody predicted on the campfire, by the way.
Somebody did. And since I don't make predictions, I wonder who that person is. Got long hair, I know that much. All right, 4-6A. Hey, this is the part of this. Here we are. If Timber Creek wants to make this last game with Northwest mean something, or want to run for that fourth place, this is where they got to start winning. They got Keller here, they got Eaton, they got Northwest. This is where you win and you make yourself in the playoffs. And then I would assume they would play Crowley, right, in the first round if they made it. Talk to me. What's that?
They'd be D1, so they'd be playing
North Crowley. My
Byron Nelson's cheering for Timber Creek to make the playoffs because they don't want to deal with North Crowley.
To do with it. All right, well, tell me, they got to beat Keller though.
But those blue lights, one thing I'm impressed by Keller, and this is something you don't see on all the teams, Ward, is when Keller is statistically eliminated. They're done. They're not going to make the playoffs. But the last couple of weeks, they played Byron Nelson pretty well. They played Euless Trinity pretty well. And now, can they upset Timber Creek, kind of break their hearts? And I know Keller would love nothing more than to play the role of a spoiler and on a high note. So I think this game is on upset watch for me. I think Keller, the way they've been playing, especially since Timber Creek did not play very well against South Lake Carroll at all, I think Keller has a really legitimate shot of winning this game. So I've got it, like I said, on upset watch. It's a 50-50 kind of a game. I'm going to stick with Timber Creek just because I think they've got a little bit more talent. But Justin Northwest is looking like they're going to go into that fourth playoff spot. So Timber Creek not only really needs to win this game for me, but they got to get some style points again to make me feel like, okay, maybe I can flip that in our rankings. Because as you're about to show, the fourth spot is wide open.
That's true. And Justin Northwest is in there right now, and this is a team that could show us this is a style point type game too. Can they beat Byron Nelson? Because teams have been playing Byron Nelson close all the way through. You say no. They didn't fare well against South Lake Carroll. This is the part of the schedule we're talking about. We were just some of the fans are kind of disguised by the undefeated record, but now they're playing the meat, and if they don't get beat down too much by South Lake Carroll, Nelson, and then Trinity next week, maybe they'll have something left in the tank for that Timber Creek game. Tell me what you think about this one. Can they show you anything that'll push you, keep them up over there if Timber Creek beats Keller like badly?
Well, our guy Kevin Costas, who is Mr. Byron Nelson, he sent me some video highlights of a new sophomore on the defensive line. They've called him up, and he's wrecking things and doing well. He's a raw talent, but it looks like he's figuring things out. At least on the 5 seconds of highlights. We're producers, Ward. We can make anybody look good. You can make me look like I'm running a 13-second 100-yard dash, but we all know I ain't running a 13-second 100-yard dash 8 times.
Probably not.
So, the really fast people can do it in 9, 10, but 13 for me is really good video editing. But Northwest, again, they're so good on the offensive line. Nate Jean, they're really good running back. It's just kind of continuing that tradition of just Northwest having that one back that they can feed. But Byron Nelson, I just think has too much depth. They got the Almanzas on both sides of the ball. Grant Bizjack, Nick Nack Bizjack, give Wizzy a bone is continuing to play very well. The defense needs to get better, but we've been talking about that. But I guess that's why they're calling some kids up and saying, okay, let's see how you can fit into this. Let's let youth shine at this point. So I think Byron Nelson has a little bit more talent. I don't know, Ward, did you see the story that I'm saddened by this, that all the Northwest ISD schools are getting their own stadiums in the next couple of years?
Oh, I
They're
didn't
going
see that.
Louisville on this.
Are they really? I did not see that. Nobody sharing
They're not going to have
nothing?
Thursday games anymore.
They're tired of sharing. No Thursday games. Well, we'd already discussed this, but we're down to 75. We're just waiting for that last spot, and it's going to be Timber Creek or Northwest for the most part, right? Those two playing.
I think Northwest Eaton still can. I mean, they'd still have to beat it. They'd have to beat a big team and kind of get it into a tiebreaker situation. But we know Trinity, South Lake, and Byron Nelson are in. It's just going to be who that fourth playoff spot is. So I'd say it's 75% set. I'd say between Justin Northwest and Timber Creek, with Northwest Eaton being a little bit of an outlier. But all of a sudden, if LD Bell beats Trinity, which you would say is kind of one of those things that doesn't ever happen, but it kind of does happen. We saw that last year. Yeah, except for last year. You get into some weird tiebreakers. So, I mean, statistically, there's a little bit going on in this district, but I think we have 3 solid. That's why I give it 75 with the 4th spot. Yeah. Still open-minded.
Still open. All right, moving up to 5-6A. We obviously got the Mound Showdown going on over at Flower Mound. Flower Mound and Marcus. Marcus has gone ahead and I think they got the shovel last week, but they went ahead and played their way out of this thing. But Flower Mound still has a shot, and they're on the inside track under your last dump there. You got them in there, the inside track over Hebron, but it's probably going to be between them and Hebron. Talk to me about this game and how much of that.
You talk to me about this game, Ward. It's in your backyard. You can just go out your back door and put your ear out and find out how the
what's happening.
What's happening there?
I
will tell you, Ward.
Go ahead.
I will tell you, Ward, that after kind of going into the statistics, which I didn't do before the dump because Braswell and Flower Mound isn't a game where you kind of go to yourself, well, let me read out these statistics. But it was not pretty, Ward. Everything you said you were worried about, which is why you kind of got the shovel out for them. I see that. I mean, that game was like 7-7 at halftime, Ward, and then they got some points late. So I'm very worried about Flower Mound, but at the same time, Ward, you may be convincing me. Marcus is not playing well at all. Not being competitive at all. I don't know if they've mailed it in already because they got their shovel, but this game just has a weird vibe to it because both teams are kind of floundering, and somebody's got to tread water in this game.
It's almost like Colton Nussmeier's rushing home to get the house cleaned up and ready to watch his brother Garrett do things at LSU because he's actually playing some ball. By the way, kudos to Garrett Nussmeier. A lot of kids that when you have to sit behind a guy for so long and wait to your senior year to really get a chance, they're gone. I'm out of here. Transfer. I was talking to your coach, Tony Benedetto, this morning, and he was talking about, people don't know about these Plano East kids that are coming up because they stuck around. They didn't listen to, they don't have parents telling them, oh, if you're not playing yet and you're a junior, you need to go to this school and that school. They stuck around. They learned. He knows how good they are. It's just not their turn yet. So where was I going with that? I was talking about Garrett Nussmeier. giving him his kudos for sticking around at LSU there, and now he's kind of shining in there. Maybe get them into that college playoff. This game, man, Flower Mound's got to find a way to get some sort of offense if our guy Massey's not playing still, because right now it's not showing up on the box score. It's not showing up when I'm there. Obviously, Louisville shut them down. They have an exceptional secondary, and there's an atmosphere. They get to play that thing at home, but still, it's going to be. If they have a home field advantage, it's going to be 60-40. It's not like they're going to have the true 90% all our guys here, because that place is going to be packed. So should be interesting. If they haven't mailed it in, Marcus can give them a game, but I don't know where they're at as far as their heads go. And then we got the other 5-6A big game, because Hebron, if Hebron can pull off a win over Louisville, all of a sudden they're really sitting pretty. But I don't know if that can happen the way Louisville is running that ball.
Yeah, Louisville and Coppell was a little bit of a weird anomaly, because Louisville was actually up on Coppell at halftime, 14-13. But Edward Griffin decided to put on a Superman cape in the second half and throw for like 5 touchdowns and 90% accuracy. One of the broadcasters at Louisville said it was like one of his top 3 performances he's seen from a quarterback. You just have to shake your head and say, congratulations, you've got Edward Griffin on your team. What can we do? So Hebron has, again, Hebron's one of those teams that has a high ceiling but a low floor depending on how they play. I think Louisville should be a favorite in this game, but if Louisville messes around and Hebron gets a couple of turnovers, they're good enough to win this game. But just like the Flower Mound and Marcus game, there's just so many uncertainties, whereas Louisville, I feel like, has a little bit more consistency. So Louisville is a favorite for me against Hebron. I think I'm probably going to take Marcus right now over Flower Mound, just because it's like Flower Mound needs 2 weeks to kind of get it figured out. I remember last year they had the same issue, Ward. They got all injuries. Their quarterback got hurt, and they're trying to figure out. They had their wide receiver playing quarterback, and it's just like, who's going to fit in? Then all of a sudden, when it's time for them to beat Hebron, they beat Hebron. So I don't know if they're going to be ready yet, but I think they're going to be ready maybe in 2 weeks for a Hebron game. So I think this district is about 75% set. I know we got Coppell. I know we got Denton Guyer. I know we got Louisville. But statistically, Marcus, Flower Mound, and Hebron could all beat each other. And all of a sudden, you just need 3 wins to get into the playoffs. Kind of like last year, Ward. You can get in at 3 wins, and if you get the right tiebreaker. You know who had the right tiebreaker last year, Ward? It'd be your Plano East Panthers.
Plano East. Hey, before we move on to Plano East District, how close is Coppell to those top 4 or 5 teams? How are they inching closer to be thrown in there when we talk about it? Are they not there yet? Or are we just, we're talking about them, but are we talking about it?
It's so hard, Ward, for me to answer that, because I have the memory of them barely beating Waxahachie. I mean, they should have lost to Waxahachie. That game was, Coppell magic right there, down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. So it feels like a team with a really good defense is going to puzzle Coppell. And but Edward Griffin is that X factor. But do I think that they could beat Southlake, DeSoto, Duncanville, North Crowley? No, but can they get there? Probably.
Okay. Because North Crowley had that issue with Lancaster in that first game too. We were like, yeah, I like it, but I got that stale taste in our mouth. But they kicked that taste out of our mouth real quick in the next 3 weeks. All right, let's move on to 6-6A. Here's your district championship. Allen home against Prosper. Talk to me about this one. What have you? I mean, Prosper only won by 12 last week, and Allen's doing their thing. Tell me, what do you think about this game? Battle Eagles.
The Battle of the Eagles, Green Eagle versus Allen Eagle. I've been consistently ranking Allen over Prosper, and I'm going to stick with that, going Allen over Prosper. I know a lot of people have seen both teams think I'm crazy. Last week or 2 weeks ago, Plano had seen now Prosper and Allen, and my Plano contacts are like, Diggs, Prosper is significantly better than Allen. Eyeball test, I see that. But it seems like Prosper just, and Prosper's beaten Allen the last 3 years. So, it's like, I keep picking Allen to beat Prosper, but Prosper has shown that they can beat Allen the last 3 years. But every single game, Ward, has been a 1-score game. And I think of last year and how Allen was very young, and they're trying to figure out Brady Bricker, and their running back was out. Allen is very healthy right now. Allen is kind of in their groove and figuring things out. McKinney showed us this week that if you can play good defense against Prosper, Prosper does not have that high-powered offense against really good defenses, and I think Allen has a really good defense. The fact that Prosper won by 12 with 3 turnovers indicates that hey, they had a kickoff return, they can do some things in special teams, but Allen I feel like is a more complete team from 1 to 22. Prosper's offensive line is a little bit better, and that's weird because Allen's been offensive line university. But after that, I think Allen's is better at almost every other position on the field. And I think once Prosper has to deal with that, they're not going to look as good. It's going to be close, but I like Allen.
Like Allen that one. Interesting. Well, I'm tired of always, I've already told you this, I'm tired of always doubting Prosper and then seeing them 4 or 5 rounds in the playoffs. But in a district game at Allen, you're probably right on that one. I might have to go that route. Plano versus Plano East. Both of these teams are fighting for that 4th spot, maybe even 3rd. Plano East, if they can beat Plano, they're like we talked earlier, they're in. They got their tiebreaker over Rock Hill. They got their tiebreaker over Plano. But can they beat Plano? This one's at Clark. They don't get the friendly confines of Kimbrough.
Has been a great place for Plano East, and the way the schedule works, kind of like with Justin Northwest, they're kind of working their way up the ladder. Okay, we beat Princeton, we beat Plano West. Okay, now all of a sudden we beat McKinney Boyd, we beat Rock Hill. We're working our way up. They lost to Prosper. Now it's Plano. So the Plano East record is a little bit misleading at 6-1. I think they have very much like Justin Northwest, they have their toughest games ahead of them. And Plano, even though they're looking at 4-3, 5-3, whatever Plano is right there, Plano has played some tough games. They've already, played Prosper. They've already played Allen. So Plano's record isn't as good. And when you look at almost every game board that they've had, Plano has looked a little bit better than Plano East statistically at just about everything. When you look at the eyeball test, Plano has a really good offensive line. They have a really good defensive line. Their running back looks like a fantasy candidate at some point. Chance Cully is really putting up big numbers. But Plano East played really good against the run against Rock Hill, holding Rock Hill to only 30 yards this past week. Something about the last 5 years, Ward, there's been a little bit of a curse. In fact, you had your camera at one of those Plano East curses because 2 straight years Plano East lost their star running back in this Plano game. And then last year, Plano didn't win a game, yet played Plano East closer than anybody else they played on their schedule. So Plano, I feel like, has all of the intangibles going on for a win in this game. But that being said, give me Plano East by 2 points.
Give me Plano East. Well, I'll play the other world. Give me Plano by 3 points. How about that? I know you don't like it, but you're going to take it. The playoff watch in this district got it 50%. I'm assuming Allen and Prosper are the ones that definite in. You don't have McKinney in quite yet.
Not quite yet. McKinney only beat Plano by 2 points. They still haven't played Plano East, and they still haven't played Rock Hill. So I mean, they could fall off the face of the earth theoretically there. And they still got to play McKinney Boyd coming up. And McKinney Boyd has had a history, just like in the Mound Showdown, of beating McKinney in very weird situations. So there's all kinds of ways that McKinney could still fall out of favor. Whoever's that 4th playoff spot, we could see tiebreakers going on because I think Rock Hill is definitely good enough to beat Plano. Plano is good enough to beat Plano East, so you could have a 3-way tie there. Then if one of those teams ends up beating McKinney gets in that tiebreaker. I think there's still lots to be decided. So you got Allen and Prosper for sure, but then you have this weird dichotomy. Ward, I want to we could probably talk about this hypothetical longer, but Ward, you don't like these 2-hour shows. But this year has a real situation where you could see, let's say Allen loses to Prosper, and then all of a sudden Plano East may not make the playoffs. But if Plano East made the playoffs, Allen would be looking at potentially playing Coppell in the first round if Plano East did not make the playoffs, or if Plano East snuck into the playoffs, but maybe by beating Allen, then they play Louisville in the first round. Could we see a situation where you maybe take your players out and we're in the playoffs, we're good to go. Let's improve our playoff positioning by maybe letting another team get in the playoffs and flipping some things. Those are always fun hypotheticals, and I've seen it happen the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It seems like it happens once or twice where a team that's in will rush players against it. Ward, if you're the coach, would you rush players to get a better playoff run?
I probably would, but I wouldn't tell anybody but everybody in the room there, and that's it. Come up with someone else. Come up with some coach speak for the rest of us. The rest of us. Festivus for the rest of us. All right, 7-6A. Man, Jesuits got that Tom Petty syndrome going on right now. I mean, to me, only beating 15 points over Irving MacArthur, who's it's an Irving school, and giving up 27 points to him when Lake Highlands went in there and just kicked them around like nobody's business. Obviously, Lake Highlands is playing a step above, but they're taking on Richardson, who was in yet another thriller for a while there, and then they ended up getting their defense couldn't hold up at all. Talk to me about this game. Is this game going to be in the 40s, 50s?
I think it's more in the 20s and 30s. I just don't think Richardson in these kind of games, they don't know how to win yet. They're still learning their culture over there. They're still trying to figure things out. They beat Berkner, but I think Berkner beat themselves in that game as much as Richardson won that game. I mean, Richardson's defense played really well against Berkner, held him like 50 or 60 yards. I mean, something ridiculous, some sort of ridiculous number. But then we see against Pierce, even though, as we'll see in the fantasy things, the yardage wasn't there. The points were there. Pierce was able to take advantage of things. So I think Jesuit is going to be able to take advantage of enough things in Richardson to win this game, kind of a 38-31 game. Just don't trust Richardson yet.
It's funny because I don't trust Jesuit. So there's a lot of not trust going on right now. But
a lot of trust issues.
We have trust issues, but we have this at 90%. Talk to me about, obviously Lake Highlands is in, Pierce is in. Tell me about the rest of it, how the rest of this thing plays out.
Yeah, we got to figure out Jesuit, Berkner, and Richardson could have a three-way tie there. I know Berkner's going to be cheering for Jesuit to beat Richardson, so then Berkner has the chance to beat Jesuit for a potential three-way tie because Richardson did not beat Berkner by very much, so it's not going to take much for them to flip that sort of tiebreaker. But for Richardson, they got to feel like, okay, we got to beat Jesuit and get in our third spot. The Irving schools, and another school that probably should have gotten flowers earlier, so we'll just kind of do a little bit of post-haste flowers. Irving beat Irving Nimitz this past week, and therefore they have a chance to win the Irving championship. But as far as Irving teams making the playoffs, they're all three out. They're not going to make the playoffs. So we really got 5 teams, 4 spots. So Berkner, Richardson, Jesuit. I think we're about 90% set because we got Pierce in, we got Lake Highlands in. I think the winner of Jesuit and Richardson is going to be in, and then it's just going to be, can Berkner get into the right kind of tiebreaker, or does Berkner finally get their perhaps well-earned shovel?
Well-earned shovel, he says. All right. Moving on to 8-6A, we got Martin versus SGP. We're talking about Martin. Do they have the Tom Petty syndrome too? Are they free falling? I know one thing: Bowie's having fun. We're not talking about Bowie here, but they're having fun because they didn't have fun those first 3 games. They were putting up points, but they couldn't pull off wins. But now they're just having a blast. They're clearly, in my mind, obviously they had that Week 11 game with SGP coming up, but in my mind, they're clearly the cream of the crop here. But we can find out stuff about South Grand Prairie here when they take on Martin. If they beat them down, then your little fears of Martin not making the playoffs are suddenly coming true here. So talk to me about this one.
And it is so hard because I still have this place in my heart that, like Arlington Martin. It's like when you hear Arlington Martin, you ascribe a status to Arlington Martin.
Exactly.
And it's hard to think that Arlington Martin is not going to make the playoffs, especially in a district where nobody is ranked. I mean, we're 8-6A. When you look at my rankings, you're not going to see an 8-6A team there. So this is not kind of funny that you're not going to see a 7-6A team there either. So, and they're playing in the first round of the playoffs. So there's going to be some teams that are not ranked who are like, we're going to get to the second round of the playoffs, whereas you've got other districts like 11-6A where Cedar Hill, who was state ranked at some point, is not going to make the playoffs and would have probably won either of these 2 districts if they were districted that way. Ward, I just cannot believe in my heart that Arlington Martin is going to give us a second straight stink bomb. I think they're going to find a way because SGP has been playing a style of football where they've been getting in shootouts. And Arlington Martin against Haltom showed that they can get in shootouts. I think we're going to have fireworks in this game. I think it's going to be the first one to 60 is going to win. Arlington Martin's been there a little bit more than SGP this year, so I think Arlington Martin is going to find a way to win a game. And I told you, Ward, go shoot this game because I think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns, a lot of highlights, a lot of future campfire segments.
Campfire segment, excellent. Well, yeah, pulling back the thing, the schedule was kind of weak-ish this week, so I asked my man Professor Diggs here, hey, pick me out 3 or 4 games that you'd like. Let's test it. Let's see if we can change that professor to producer Diggs. and see if you can pick me out some games. And I actually have a feeling that I'm going to be doing the same in week 11 too, because your mind works better than mine when it comes to tiebreakers and stuff, and you'll be able to say you need to be here and here because of this, that, and the other. Where I'm just sitting there like, I have Reginald Samples dumbfounded face. I don't know what's going on, but you'll figure it out. Let's figure out 8-6-8. You got it 50%. You got Bowie in. Who else you got in?
You're Bowie and Arlington in, but right now you've got Holtham as part of that mix. You've got Martin. You've got. I even think you can get Lamar into it at this point. If Lamar can somehow get a couple of big wins, and Sam Houston, I think, is good enough to beat somebody that they shouldn't beat. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So I got Arlington and I got Bowie in there. But SGP, Lamar, Martin, Haltom, there's still a lot to be determined for 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we could end up with tiebreaker chaos, three-way tie, four-way tie for 2 spots or 1 spot. So I've only got this 50% set. I think there's a lot more drama in 8-6A than just about any other district in the area.
Yeah, we can learn. By the way, every single game that we shot of Martin, which is, I believe, 3 this year, Bob Wager's there. He's watching. So this stuff is kind of turning inside him, seeing him. I'm assuming he's probably at the Holton game. We weren't at that one. His stomach's probably turning like, oh, I just want to go in there and give him one of those Bob Wager motivational speeches that's going to turn this thing around. But he's there. He's supporting those Martin Warriors. Hopefully maybe they can get this thing turned around for him. 9-6A, we got Garland and Lakeview Centennial on the schedule there. Lakeview Centennial is wavering around on your – I can't even remember if they've gotten a shovel or not. I know they're certainly on shovel watch if they haven't been beat over the head yet. Garland hasn't played well enough to even deserve to be on a shovel watch thing. Talk to me about this game and what you think is going to happen in 9-6A.
Well, remember, I've got Naaman Forest in right now, but Naaman Forest lost to Rowlett, so they're going to be sitting in with 4 losses. So they can't avoid bad tiebreaker scenarios. They kind of need everything to go as planned so they can kind of get in with 4 losses and have more favorable tiebreakers. The way Rowlett is playing, I don't think Rowlett is going to be able to tie them, so Naaman Forest is still kind of in control of their own destiny. Of all the games this week, this is the only one that has a little bit of intrigue. Lakeview Centennial is just winning ugly right now. They beat Rowlett 13-8 this past week. Garland was competitive for a half against Wiley, but kind of fell off. I had a chance to watch it because Garland ISD, bless their hearts, they do production right. They got both games up. You can watch your game and you can watch the game at the other stadium at the same time. So I had a chance to kind of keep an eye on that. Garland looks like they bounced back a little bit. We remember we talked about Garland and their losses, but it looks like the players that they have left have kind of bought in and are playing better week in and week out. So credit to Coach Russell, who has really gotten the most out of his players, even though what he expected to get the most out of isn't what is right there right now. So I got Garland as a favorite in this game. I thought Lakeview Centennial going into the season would beat Garland, but it looks like Lakeview Centennial is kind of on the way down. Garland looks like they're on the way up. So I'm going to take Garland in an ugly, like a 16-13 or 16-12 kind of a game. Just where the numbers don't really make sense.
If you're looking for ugly scores, that's the district to go to. You get some weird ones in that one. You got this thing at 90%. Obviously, Saxe and Wiley East and Wiley are in. Who do you right now? You still have Naaman Forest, and there's 4. What else? You've gone over it. Maybe just recap it real quick. Who you think? What needs to happen?
Yeah, I've got Naaman Forest at 4, and really they're pretty built into that 4 spot right now. But they could still lose out. They've got 3 losses. They're probably going to get a 4th loss. And once that 4th loss kicks in, I think they still have to play Saxe. Then you're dealing with tiebreakers and things like that. So if anybody gets them, if they get upset one more time, then all of a sudden, they're out. There's a little bit of variability still, but I think they're still going to be they're the best of the rest.
Gotcha. All right, moving on to 10-6A, we got Longview versus Rockwell Heath. Rockwell Heath is on here because of how badly Forney's playing, and all of a sudden Rockwell Heath is smelling a little. They have some sort of smell in their nose, thinking, "Man, maybe I could turn this thing, and if we pull off an upset here or against a rival Rockwell next week, maybe we can get in this joint, right?"
What I'm thinking right now is the most likely scenario because Forney is just what can you do? I mean, they've shut down JV and Osborne for the year, and they were down 35-7 against Rockwall at halftime. But to their credit, Coach Fleener team is not going to quit. He went in there and he lit them up at halftime, and they showed a little bit of fire. But still, at this point, now that Forney is 3-5, I mean, 1-3 in district, there's just very little that they can do. I mean, they still have they have the best chance to get the fourth playoff spot right now. But I do see a scenario, Ward, where if Rockwall Heath can beat Forney and Forney can beat Tyler Legacy, you could get in with just 2 wins. A 2-4 3-way tiebreaker. Everything else would have to be clean. But what I want to see in this game for Rockwall Heath is I think Longview is going to be a big favorite in this game. But how competitive is Rockwall Heath? Rockwall Heath should have beaten North Forney a couple of weeks ago. They looked good against Roy City. I mean, just absolutely destroyed Roy City. And they lost to Tyler Legacy on an overtime field goal. That game is just going to live in Rodney Webb's nightmares as we're trying to figure out all of this. But if Rockwall Heath can be a bit more competitive against Longview than the other two teams, Forney and Rockwall has, I think that will give better credence to my philosophy, my theory. And it's what I'm currently picking right now, that Rockwall Heath is going to slide into that fourth position in a 2-4 tiebreaker. It's going to be ugly, Ward, but I think they're going to do it.
It's going to be ugly. But there's been a lot of ugly things happening in this district. Ugly injuries, ugly play by some of the squads, and that's why we're at 50% right now. Longview's
I think you got Longview and Rockwall in. North Forney is likely in, but right now there's 3 teams that could very well get into that last playoff spot. Tyler Legacy could win that tiebreaker. Forney could win that tiebreaker. Rockwall Heath could win that tiebreaker. Forney's kind of got the inside track, but definitely Tyler Legacy could look at things and say, why not us? So there's definitely some storylines to be played out in this district. North Forney still has to kind of show what they've got against the big dogs in this district. They've kind of had an easier schedule than some of the others. They haven't played Rockwall yet. They haven't played Longview yet. So we still got to figure out what we've got. So I think this district is about 50% set. You got Longview and Rockwall guaranteed. I want to see a little bit more from North Forney, and then that fourth playoff spot is wide open. Roy City is the only one that I think is pretty much cooked.
They're cooked. They just keep getting bombed by everybody. All right, our last 6A district, Waxahachie and Skyline's playing on Thursday night. And Thursday means there's a good chance for one of my shooters to go out and see Bo Barnes play. I love watching Bo Barnes play. No matter what's going on Skyline offensively or defensively, he's going to make at least 3 or 4 big hits that make you realize why he's going. I believe he's going to why he's going to Texas. He's devastating. Waxahachie apparently is our team because they've been on a ton of times. And they're going to probably be on this week as well. But talk to me about this game. That's if you look on the Dallas Morning News, it says Friday, but this is a Thursday night game.
We're breaking news for you here. They'll probably have it fixed by the time our podcast gets up, Ward. But I don't know if you saw this past week, but Coach Tollison called me out. Did you see that?
No, you told me about that. Yeah, tell the people.
I mean, to give a little bit of backstory, if you're a first-time viewer, in June or July, I had a debate against a member from a different podcast called The Dub. The people had spoken, and it was debating whether or not Waxahachie or Lancaster would make the playoffs because most people, the conventional wisdom with Cedar Hill was definitely in. So who was going to get that last spot, Waxahachie or Lancaster? Turns out we're both right. I think Waxahachie and Lancaster are both going to make the playoffs. But there was a very pivotal scene in our podcast where I was like, I'm gonna pretend like you're Brian for a second. B-Rise. I was like, B-Rise, tell me one name on Waxahachie that you think is going to make them win this year. Just give me one name. Come on, Ward, or come on, B-Rise, give me one name. Just one. Just give me a name. Can you give me anybody on the Waxahachie who is coming back, who is going to make you believe that Waxahachie is going to win? And he couldn't come up with one name. He couldn't name anybody. He was just like, well, I think that they were third place last year, and I'm going to be third place this year. So they've adopted that as their kind of the no names is what they're saying. And now that they beat Cedar Hill, Coach Tollison kind of threw me a little bit of shade, a little bit of love at the same time. I think Coach Tollison appreciates what I do and probably watched that debate and smiled because he knew what he was going to have. Right. And I actually got to watch a fun video of his locker room speech right before that Cedar Hill game, and he had me fired up. I mean, he was invoking the Lord, he was invoking football, he was invoking family. I mean, it was a Sunday night revival in that locker room speech. So I was like, this guy can speak right there. We need him to come to our next annual review thing and give you a speech right before you yell at me about, so he can get you filled with the Lord or something before you just kind of go off on all of us freelancers and social media people that you just beat up and have all these technicalities that we're not hashtagging and tagging people on
Exactly.
social media. But I'm fascinated with this game because it's a Thursday night game. But Waxahachie played Horn a little bit closer than you would have thought. The game against Cedar Hill was, a little bit closer than you would have thought. Mesquite a little bit closer than you would have thought. Because Bo Barnes and Skyline's defense is so good, why not Skyline pulling an upset? I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not calling it, Ward, but I think
he's
it's going to
not
be a
calling it.
competitive 48-minute game. Waxahachie should be considered a favorite, but it wouldn't surprise me if craziness ensued here.
It's funny because he couldn't name the play. I bet you 4 weeks into the season he'd be like, "Oh," because all I could name was Wade Lemons. To be honest with you, I could name Wade Lemons, but now Wade Lemons is like, I mean, he's still scoring touchdowns, but you're named Jerry Meyer. You're going to be naming Cohen Brown, Tristan Gardner. I mean, you can name all these players because they've shown up.
Clausen on that defensive line playing
Yeah,
great.
it's you can name all these people because now it's you've seen them, and that I guarantee you next time you're like, all right, why don't we have a draw here? They both make it, Cedar Hill doesn't, but that's all hindsight stuff. We're at 95% in this district. Tell me, obviously Duncanville, DeSoto, and Wax are in. What's the little variance here?
I mean, if all of a sudden Skyline beats Waxahachie this week, and then maybe Lancaster drops a game to Mesquite or something, then you can get some craziness going on. So I'm not willing to call it 100% quite yet. I'm giving, especially in this district, Mesquite has played pretty well, played very competitively. So I don't think there's a team you can look at that and go, "Oh, that's the team that is completely a guaranteed win." Right now, it looks like Mesquite Horn's not going to win a game in this district, but they played Waxahachie to a one-score game. So, given that, I'm only going to give it a 95% set rate. I think if Waxahachie beats Skyline this week, it's pretty much 100%.
All right, let's move on to 5A, 3-5A Division One. We got Richland against Toledo. The tiers in this district, it just seems like Aledo and Ryan are just a little bit, a lot further ahead than Richland is. But Richland is our third playoff team out of this district, and they're playing the number one squad, and they're probably going to get first. They're going to get a first round win, most definitely. So talk about this game and what it means to you.
I've actually thought this, and I know my Alito friends and who listen to this podcast don't like this. I think the way Richland plays football, they're going to play a more competitive game against Alito than Denton Ryan played against Richland. So I think Alito is, especially if Alito has one of their 3 turnover games, which they have done quite regularly over the last year or so. I
You
think
just like
Richland has a
torturing this fan
chance
base.
to stay in this game. I
You
think we're
just
going to see
like
a game
torturing
that
this. You just like torturing this fan base. I don't know why you can't leave Alito alone. I got to win in this game. You could have him playing Granbury, but you already said at the beginning. Well, if Granbury upsets Alito, then all of a sudden the apple cart. You just like picking on you. I'm beginning to think you're a bully. I don't
I
like
think
bullies, and Alito used to bully teams. I got letters about it back in the day. I think you're bullying Alito. Now go ahead and finish your statement. That's me,
Richland's going to
Bearcat
play
fan.
Alito more competitively than Denton Ryan play or Richland played Denton Ryan. I think Alito is going to win. I think they're going to win by 3 scores comfortably, but I
Okay.
think the game will be within 1 or 2 scores at some point in the second half.
All right. All right. And this one's already 100% set. We got Azel in as that 4th team, right? So we're good with
And
3-5-8.
Denton Ryan beat Azel by like 50 last week. So it was kind of that whole Midlothian Heritage and Crandall thing that you get an undefeated team that just gets completely blasted.
Yeah, they get to learn what it's like to have a defeat in a very tough way. 3-5-8 Division One's probably they're hoping to get a sweep of 4-5-8 Division One, but we'll see. We'll see how Azel plays against the first place team in this district. Pasco versus OD Wyatt. Talk about this game and what it means to 4-5-8 Division One.
I think Saginaw Azle is going to be your 4-1 game in this district. And I think Azle's probably a little bit better than Saginaw right now. But OD Wyatt had played Saginaw and they played Chisholm Trail within 2 points. But then last week, Ward, they lost by like 60 to Arlington Heights all of a sudden out of nowhere. So this game is a shovel game because I would say the loser of this game is done. So this is kind of the last piece that we need to have to figure out who the four teams are going to be. If Wyatt beats Pascal, then there are some things that can still happen. But once Pascal has beaten Wyatt, then Wyatt will have 4 losses. They're done. And I would say we're pretty much just figuring out positioning at that point with because we still got Arlington Heights and Pascal still got to play each other. And then we also still got the battle. I think they call it the Battle of the Wagon Wheel or something. Word. Sounds like a country road game with Saginaw and Chisholm Trail. Kind of a week, and that's week 11. I think after this week we're going to have our 4 teams set, but still seeding is like who wants to play Alito, who wants to play Denton Ryan. So you got to figure all that stuff out still. So I'd say we're about 80% set. I think we'll go to 90% after this week. I got Pascal over OD Wyatt. I think they're going to end OD Wyatt's chances. Pretty much Arlington Heights showed me that how do you beat Wyatt? You just run him over. I think Pascal's going to be able to do it, and then we got to figure out seeding after that.
Gotcha. We already talked a lot about 5-5A Division One when we talked about the flowers that Wakeland deserve, but now Wakeland's going to take their flowers against the district's best team in Lone Star. Although Reedy may have something to say about that, but he feels it's Lone Star. I feel it's Lone Star. Talk about this game, and then we'll talk about the playoff situation in this one, which seems to be just about set.
Yeah, the way things worked with this district, Wakeland has pretty much won all of their tiebreakers, so we've got that 4th place set now. This district was crazy like 2 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden it's like we're done. We figured it out. Lone Star is 5-6 touchdowns. This is one of those games where like you want to shoot it because okay, we got 2 playoff teams, but Lone Star is so much better than Wakeland. I don't think it's going to be a competitive game at all. I think Lone Star wins by 5 or 6 touchdowns. We're pretty much 99% set on this. You're going to have Reedy against Lone Star for the 1-2 spot. You got McKinney North sitting in number 3, and Wakeland having beat everybody who could tie with them at this point. Sherman is the only one, and Sherman can't tie them. So even if Sherman upset them, Frisco Wakeland still wins every tiebreaker that they would be in. So I'm only going to say 1% because I haven't gone through and run every mathematical permutation on it to see if anybody could pass them up there. But we pretty much got our 4 playoff
Pretty
teams.
much there. All right, what about 6-5A Division One? We got first time I've ever used these typing fingers to type in the word Molina, but Molina's right there, and upset over or win over WT White. I'm not even calling upset, but it probably would be an upset. Upset over WT White gets him right in the mix here. Talk to me about this one.
So for me, this is straight up for the 4th playoff spot because Molina beat North Mesquite last week, and North Mesquite was a team that I thought was going to slide into that 4th playoff spot, maybe be our upset special. But Molina said, no. Well, let's don't forget about the Jaguars over here. Remember us. Molina putting up 50 points against North Mesquite. Yeah. I think that that shows me that they could be competitive in this game. I think we're going to get a high-scoring fireworks game. I'm going to stick with my Longhorns of WT White. But, this is one of those games that, we would have written off Molina 2 or 3 weeks ago, but all of a sudden they get a win, and now we're in a kind of a situation where that WT White Creekview game, all of a sudden it might be haunting for WT White because that it exposes WT White now. Yeah. One game completely flips this thing. So I like WT White, but watch out for the Molina Jaguars. They're going to be giving everything in this game, and why not Molina? But I think WT White's got a little bit more talent.
Be interesting to see him in the postseason. Nice little first-round matchup with Lone Star. Whew. All right.
Would you see the camera crew out for a little bit of Lone Star Molina?
I don't know. I think they may be busy on that one, but we'll see. We'll see. What do we got here with Creekview and West Mesquite? The records say undefeated against undefeated, but West Mesquite's playing so much better than just about, I haven't seen much of Newman Smith, but just about everybody else in this district. Your thoughts on this one before West Mesquite takes on Newman Smith for possible the district title?
I was excited. Like 4 or 5 days ago, I thought this was going to be the game I was going to go to. It's Thursday night. Mesquite ISD Hospitality is
Mm-hmm.
undefeated. But then I found out it's going to be on CW 33, and they've had the curse where every game that they put on this year has been like a 30 or 40 point game. West Mesquite is like a 30 point computer favorite over Creekview as it is, and then Creekview, their quarterback situation, like if he's not in there because he got hurt against WT White, this just looks like a blowout waiting to happen. This kind of looks like that Denton Ryan Azel game. Yeah, the records are nice, but one team is just playing at a different level right now. I think West Mesquite's going to win this game by 4 or 5 scores. It's not going to be competitive. It's not going to be fun. So I'm going to look. Then I looked for someplace else to go. Looked like Forrester was welcoming me with open arms. So
Maybe down
I
here.
think the playoffs are about 90% set. I think after this week with Molina and WT White, we're going to be at 100% set.
100%. Have it all set up. Got you. All right, 7-5A Division One. You have Highland Park owning this district, but then we got other teams playing some ball here. Talk about Red Oak and Burleson Centennial. When I had Burleson go down to play one of my Houston teams and get spanked around, I kind of didn't pay as much attention as I should. Should I be back on their bandwagon? What's going on here with the
Well,
Spartans?
I actually received a complaint about you, Ward. I mean, this is
Okay.
something I should probably do off air, but we're going to do it on
Mm-hmm.
air for
For
podcast and ratings.
for setup
But
purposes.
a Burleson Centennial parent named Damian Long, whose son Damian Long is the star wide receiver for
Good
Burleson
player.
Centennial. He doesn't like the fact that you don't really let the little guy get bobbleheads. It's like you want big names, you want big stars, and the biggest names in there. But statistically, he feels like he's gone through all of your bobbleheads. He knows everybody who's gotten a bobblehead this year, and he has run numbers. He's like, they're all injured or they're all done for the year or whatever. You need to be giving Damian Long a bobblehead, and he's got solid research that indicates that he is better than at least half of the people who you have given
Half you
bobbleheads
got
to
him.
statistically this year.
Okay.
Now they may be statistically because they're not playing because they're hurt, but
Right.
he doesn't like the fact that you refuse to give those second tier high statistic players bobbleheads. What do you have to say for yourself,
Yeah, he's
Ward?
got a point. He's got a point. I got to open up a shop in my garage here and start making these things myself. But until then, I got to order them a month and a half ahead of time. So some of these guys are going to have to do it on the reputation from their past. It's the award is more of a cumulative high school career award than just 1 year. So send me your stats, and we'll see what we can do. It'll probably be late in the season, but we'll see what we can do. Send me some stats here. I'll make
But
a
but
decision
his
on that.
numbers look good. He is a big bobblehead candidate, and all of a sudden, Burleson Centennial is back in the playoff race. They beat Tyler High this past week in Tyler High. But the problem with Burleson Centennial Ward is they have this really bad defense, and it's like they can play these shootout games, but you like with Midlothian, you never know how they're going to go. It can go bad, it can go good. And against Tyler, it went well. With Midlothian, the fourth quarter, it went bad. Red Oak put up 77 against Cleburne this past week, so now we got Burleson Centennial's defense coming in here. I think Red Oak's going to take care of business. But Burleson Centennial, they're going to get their numbers. They're going to put up their stats. But I think Red Oak's going to win like a 62-40 kind of a game because Burleson Centennial cannot stop a cold right now. But I think right now, because of that variability, if all of a sudden Burleson Centennial can upset Red Oak, who knows what could happen. Joshua could still find a way to get in there. Tyler High could beat the right team. So there's a lot of chaos in the middle four. I don't feel great about Midlothian because remember Midlothian was down 3 scores to Burleson Centennial in the fourth quarter.
Sure.
Joshua, it looks like they've been competitive, but now that they're playing the meat of the district, they don't look as good. But for one game, can they get Burleson Centennial? Because Burleson Centennial playing up, playing down against everybody. So there are still a lot of questions, but the one question I do not have is Highland Park. Highland Park is the solid number one. But I think 2 through 6 still all have a chance to beat each other in any given week. So I still think there's a little bit of variability. Right now, I've got Red Oak 2, Midlothian 3, Burleson Centennial 4. But could Joshua pull an upset and maybe even force a coin flip?
What about Tyler? Could they do something?
Well, Tyler's already done the things that they could do, and they've done
That's
a
it.
lot of losing. Tyler beat Joshua, but they lost to Burleson Centennial. So if
Right.
Joshua can beat Burleson Centennial, then maybe we get
All
coin
right.
flips, maybe we get tiebreakers involved.
He
So
said they.
definitely some things still to be determined.
He said they've done all they can do. Well, they could pull off the biggest upsets of all times. That's what they could do, but they're not going to. And why am I talking about East Texas teams? 3-5A Division II, Mansfield Summit against Colleyville Heritage. Between me and Kenny, we've been to 3 Colleyville Heritage games. I haven't been totally impressed, except for the fact every time we walk away from them, there's a W right up by their name. So they're winning. Some might say they're winning ugly, but they are winning these games, especially with their best player out for the year, and Braden Blewett. Talk to me about them against Mansfield Summit, because Summit had come on there with a couple big wins in a row, but then they got humbled by Argyle.
Yeah, that's the thing with Mansfield Summit. It's like they know how to play some of these close games, but when they get hit in the mouth with some good technique and some good size, they wilt really quickly. In Colleyville Heritage, it's like the numbers aren't there because they lost Braden Blewett and their offense is ugly at times and it doesn't look great. But when they need to execute, they are amazing situationally. It's like, when they got to start that third quarter and they need a score, they know how to go down and get that score. Jared Wiley is a really talented running back for Colleyville Heritage. Their offensive and defensive lines are really, really good. They got also a really good linebacker core. But then it just gets ugly. It's a lot of punting and field situation, but they seem to know how to figure it out in these ugly games. And this is another one of those games. So it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be a shooting masterpiece for it. But I think Colleyville Heritage finds a way to win this game by 7 to 9 points. In the kind of a game where it's like never in doubt.
And they managed to score 35 against Argyle, and Blewett was down for the count there. So they still ended up putting some points. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just picking the wrong games to go catch them out. All right, talk to me about the playoff situation in this district.
I think we're 75% set because we could still have some weird tiebreakers going on. I think it's going to be exactly who I thought it was at the beginning of the season, but I've changed it 5 times since then. That kind of got us back to our flip-flopping conversation last week. But I think it's going to be Timberview, Summit, Argyle, and Colleyville Heritage. But, Seguin, could they do something? They got 3 losses now, so they're going to need a little bit of help and a little bit of magic to get in there. But I would say, because of the tiebreakers, because Timberview has a couple of bad losses, and I mean they only beat Burleson by 4 last week. I just feel like it's possible that one of the lower teams could knock off one of the better teams, and then all of a sudden you get a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, and I think poor Seguin, as much as I like Joe Gordon, they're close to seeing the shovel from you. If I'm kind of
not quite yet, but it's really close.
It's real close. All right, we got a couple 4-5A Division II games to talk about. Let's start off with Melissa and Emerson. We already talked about Emerson and how they've gotten the shovel. Now they're trying to play a little spoiler role here and slap Melissa around. They're not going to spoil them too much because Melissa's in. Talk to me about this game.
Well, I'll be curious because we've seen Lovejoy get better. It's like you can just you don't even have to watch them, and you can just see their statistics because they beat Frisco Emerson 48-7. The defense is getting better, the offense is getting better, the running game is getting better. Dalen McCutcheon, you would think I don't even think about him for fantasy stats right now because he's not even a factor in a lot of these games because a lot of players are focused on stopping him. But Lovejoy's just distributing it around. They've got 10 to 12 players in the box score every week that all have 40 or 50 yards, and Dalen is one of them. But Todd Dodge is masterful at getting everybody involved. But has Melissa gotten better? I don't know yet because they've been kind of playing the bad team. So can Melissa show me the style points like Lovejoy showed me and kind of beat Frisco Emerson badly? That's what I want to see in this game. Melissa will be a big favorite, but are they going to beat Frisco Emerson by 41 the same way Lovejoy did? I don't think so, and that's why I think Melissa's going to be still a step below Lovejoy when you're thinking about potential playoff rematches in a couple of rounds.
Yeah, and then you talk about Lovejoy. They're playing Walnut Grove. Walnut Grove's got a lot of impressive offensive players out there. I mean, Cam Newton ran for almost 250 last week against Anna, and Luke Watkins is out there catching passes left and right. They're doing things, but we've learned from a lot of teams. You get into a shootout with Lovejoy, you better be able to stick with that shootout for every single second on that clock because they're certainly on.
Yeah, and that's why this game is a little bit interesting for me because Walnut Grove, looks like on paper they should be able to go score for score with Lovejoy. I mean, you think of that Lovejoy Anna 66-62 game, and then you think of the Lovejoy Melissa 41-38, I think it was 41-38.
Yeah,
And so
41-38.
you would think Walnut Grove could score for score, but it looks like Lovejoy's figured out something defensively. And I think there's just that element of Lovejoy, that mystique, kind of like with Duncanville, that once they've got things figured out, I think they're going to roll in this game. I think Walnut Grove's going to have some late scores, a little bit of window dressing, but there's still that little bit of doubt because we've only seen a sample size of one where Lovejoy has actually shown some defense. So if that sample size was misleading for any reason, this game could end up being one of those 70-63 games where Walnut Grove goes score for score with them. But I just think Lovejoy. I believe in Dodge. I'm buying into the Todd Dodge philosophy, and I think that they've started to embrace his winning mentality. And I think Lovejoy is going to take care of business by at least 3 scores. I don't even know if this is going to be a big shootout, but just in case it is, I've got a little bit of insurance. But we'll talk about that.
By the way, Lovejoy's played some hellified defense against Independence and Liberty. I mean, that really showed me something by holding them to no points, like so many other teams have. We're about set as far as the playoffs go in this district as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is like maybe a chaotic scene where Melissa loses out and Emerson beats them, and then Melissa loses to one of the Frisco bad schools or something. Then all of a sudden, and loses to Walnut Grove. Maybe Emerson can get in there, but 1% likelihood. So I think we're pretty much set. Emerson's on the outside looking at.
All right, moving on to 5A Division II. Sometimes when teams, like we're going to get to it with Crandall, when teams take a beating like Woodrow Wilson did to South Oak Cliff, it lingers for a while. But man, I hate to be like this, but these teams are so used to getting their beat, taking that beating from them. I don't know if it affects them like it may affect Crandall in a couple weeks. So now they have a big district game with Samuel. Talk to me about this one.
Yeah, this could be for playoff seeding because right now I've got Woodrow Wilson 2, Hillcrest 3, Samuel 4. But if Samuel can beat Woodrow Wilson, now we got a 3-way tie, get into some point differentials. Maybe Samuel, because basically if you're at 1 or 2, you get the home game, and I think that matters for DISD because you go into Crandall, you go into Midlothian Heritage, you go into Kaufman, one of those places, and you're trying to deal with that crowd, and that you're done at that point. So you want to be at home in this situation. I think Woodrow Wilson wants to be at home and getting in that number 2 spot. I don't know if they're going to win at home, but I still think that you would much prefer to be at home. Samuel has a really good running game this year, and if they can kind of take the air out of the ball and limit possessions, kind of like Brock and Mineral Wells. I know you don't care about Brock and Mineral Wells, but that was a game that only had 6 possessions in the whole game. It was 21-0. Oh, wow. And I looked at that game and I was like, what happened in this game? Brock only beat Mineral Wells 21-0. Then you look at it, there's only like 50 plays in the game. And you're like, I think that's what Samuel has to do to be competitive against Woodrow Wilson. I don't know if they have size-wise. Woodrow Wilson has usually the second best athletes in the district of South Oak Cliff. And I think those athletes will take care of business against Samuel.
And this district, like the last, is just about wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to require like South Oak Cliff losing a game and, somebody passing Samuel because Samuel loses to Thomas Jefferson. It's 99% set.
All right, 6-5A Division II. We just talked about Crandall. Is that loss going to have a lingering effect when they take on Ennis? Because they don't need it.
That's why I'm curious about this game because I have to think it does, right? Yeah, I mean, Ennis has been playing a lot of one-score games against these teams, and they just haven't found a way to crest it. And now Ennis is playing for their lives because they've already lost to Terrell. They've already lost to Midlothian Heritage. Now they got to get some sort of tiebreaker. They got to get some sort of win. And Crandall has to be feeling like, they were feeling on top of the world. It was, 6-0, feeling invincible. Now, after that humbling, they got to beat Ennis, who has the athletes to do this. I think this is an upset. I'm going to pick Crandall, but I would not be surprised at all to see Ennis win this game. It's just kind of how you feel their coaches can overcome that beating that they had last week. Right. I don't know those coaches well enough to know, like, traditionally how they do that, but I feel like Crandall has got to be psychologically weak after this.
Oof. And it's already kind of compared to all the other districts we have playoff-wise, this one's already a little bit mushy after, Midlothian Heritage is in. And talk to me about the rest of the 60% here.
Yeah, I mean, you got Crandall and Kaufman. Crandall has a win over Kaufman. Kaufman has a win over Ennis. Ennis had, Ennis and Terrell has a win over Ennis, but if all of a sudden Mesquite Poteet only lost by one to Kaufman, and they still got a couple of big games left. Ennis, if they can beat Crandall, all of a sudden you got this big mix in the middle where you're like, who's going to make it out of this? So I'd say it's only about 60% set. There's 5 or 6 teams that have legitimate chances to control their own playoff destiny. Midlothian Heritage in Crandall, Kaufman, but they have good buffer wins right now. But Terrell Ennis and Mesquite Poteet all have chances to go win 1 or 2 of those games against those teams, and all of a sudden they're in that spot.
Interesting. All right, let's get to some small schools. 7-4A Division I battle between Aubrey and Lake Dallas. It's funny. I was at the Lake Dallas Panther Creek game, and it was 31-6. Panther Creek, and I was, shutting things down. I was kind of talking to some kid on the Lake Dallas side, and he's like, "Hey, we're going to come back. You probably don't remember this, but we played Emerson last year, and obviously your voice is in my head as soon as he brings up the Emerson game, because that was a topic of discussion for the last couple, 2-3 weeks of the season because of the way Emerson, I can't even. I think they blew that game. They ended up losing it. I don't know if they needed to win it. They certainly didn't need to win it because they went 5 rounds deep. But they were doing crazy things at the end, and all of a sudden, Lake Dallas came from way behind. So he's telling me, what's going to happen again tonight? I said, it's not going to. But let's just keep talking about it. And then it did. I'm halfway up the stands, and they had Panther Creek had ran to get the first down and run out the clock. And he was like, let me get 2 or 3 more yards. And he got the ball punched out. Lake Dallas scores, gets a 2-point conversion. All of a sudden, we're going 4 overtimes. And they ended up losing. But what impressed me out of this, and you'll find this out later in fantasy, this Dylan Brockle kid, the running back for Lake Dallas, 41 carries. They went to him like Argyle used to do with Nick Ralston. Just give him, like they did in the state title game, just give it to him until he dies. We're just going to keep giving him the rock. And now they're playing Aubrey, and they lost that game to Panther Creek. I'm talking so much about them as if they won the game. They lost, so now they're in some dire straits here. So they need to pick. What's that? Yeah, they came back, but they're still at the point where they need to come up with some wins here. So talk to me about this game.
Yeah, this district is crazy right now. I think you got Salina 1, Panther Creek 2, but you got 4 really good teams. You got Sulphur Springs, you got Lake Dallas, you got Aubrey, and you've got Paris. Paris has already beat Lake Dallas. So Lake Dallas is looking at things like, we've lost to Panther Creek by 1 score. We lost to Paris by 1 score. But Aubrey beat Paris. So now all of a sudden, if Lake Dallas can beat Aubrey, now we've got potentially a 3-way tie for 4th place. So Lake Dallas, I mean, you talk about that desperation you saw in Panther Creek. You're going to get that desperation against Aubrey, and I think they're going to get it. I think the way that they came back, they showed that heart. Lake Dallas was a team that I think we had number 3 in our preseason, right below Panther Creek and Salina, and now they're fighting for their playoff lives. Aubrey had a nice win over Paris, so they're feeling confident because they're like, we beat a team by 3 scores that already beat this team. I think we're going to see complete desperation out of Lake Dallas, and they're going to win this game by 7 points.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, that loss is going to haunt them if they don't win this one. It's going to haunt them to no end. All right, talk to me about the rise of Maypearl.
Man, this is a fun story because, tell me about Maypearl. What do you know about Maypearl, Ward?
Not much. I know they're on the country roads. That's about it.
I mean, would you even consider them a DFW area team?
Barely. I could probably.
Consider them. Maypearl has been so irrelevant for they're like with Venus. Maypearl and Venus kind of are in the same speed. Like all of a sudden, like Godly, Maypearl and on that 67 road out, kind of headed out to Johnson County. But Maypearl now is in this really competitive district, a 6-team district, 5-3A. You got Maypearl, you got Grandview, you got Mejia, you got Whitney, you got Grosbeck, and you got West. I mean, you got some good team. You got zebras and goats in this district. And all of a sudden, in this district, the last 2 weeks, every single game, Ward, except for one, has been within 1 score. And Maypearl is now sitting in this district at 2-0 with a really good chance to win the district. They beat Grandview. They beat Whitney. I think that Maypearl has a really good chance to make the playoffs and maybe even win this district. I mean, this is a great story, Ward. It's something that we're excited. We like talking about when those teams like Venus or whatever come out of nowhere. Fort Worth Poly like beat Northside last week.
Right.
Kind of that same vein. May Pearl, giving you your love.
Give you the love. This is a lengthy version of giving you flowers. I had a good boy made.
Yeah, full segment.
I almost called him
The
a girl.
rise of May.
I had a girl made flower, made pearl. Good believe.
May flowers.
All right. Weekly fantasy. We call it weekly fantasy, but we have a makeup week, so it's a weekly and a half.
Say something more, because
save me something.
You know, you don't. I mean, I know people watch this podcast. I can see the analytics, but Warren, I didn't realize how beloved you were, because I had multiple people over multiple days come up to me and say I did you wrong in fantasy. Like they just started the conversation.
Absolutely.
Like they just come and just straight on. Like you don't get to do that to Ward, and I'm just like, I did. I mean, I kind of thought
bully.
I view this as a friendly thing. Like if all of a sudden one of your guys was injured and you didn't know they were out for the season, because I mean, how are you supposed to know if Dylan Brockle is out for the season or something? I'd let you replace them. I just figure it's kind of, we need 3 scores, we need 3 names. It's less about, it's just about kind of highlighting some kids who we think are going to score points. So the more kids we can highlight, the better. But apparently there are some really strong fantasy football players out there who are very rule based, kind of like you are. Like I guess you're a rotisserie baseball commissioner at some point in your dreams, and you're very rule based. So you didn't like it, you let it go. But I think the karma came back and took care of things. But yeah, exactly. I was shocked how many people came and talked to me about that throughout the week.
Yeah, the makeup week, I still ended up winning. You bring up injury as your example. Injury, I would understand. You just not knowing that your guy didn't even play that week. That goes into a category I like to call stupidity. Stupidity. Do your research. You know where the bye week is for these teams. Dadgummit, it's on the pigskin prep. You bullied me. Oh, man, you bullied me. And the fans got behind me. They don't like seeing me get pushed around, put in a daggone locker with a mop and shut in there and take it. I don't want to take it. Look at that. I won that last week, 2 weeks ago, anyway. So the people that support me, I appreciate it. And the people that really support me, I apologize because I lost the actual week. This was actually one of our, even though he beat me by 70 points, it still felt like it was a lot closer. 5-3. I'm 3-5. We only got 3 weeks left, so I got to win out. I doubt it's going to happen, but Diggs, especially the way as competitive as Diggs is, he'll probably bully me into something too. It's just going to be awful. But Diggs, who you got going this week in the quarterback position? Dalen?
I mean, we talked about, I think we're going to see a lot of offensive fireworks in that game against Arlington Martin. Give me SGP's quarterback, Dalen Brooks. He's put up some big numbers. He's a mobile quarterback. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball. I think he can give me 400 or 500 yards.
Well, I'm going with Legend Bay over at North Forney. It feels like I'm picking 2 running backs this week because that's where I'm going to get most of my points is through the ground. I'm with Legend, but that's who I'm running with. Speaking about the ground, you are going to that same district in 8-6A. You're going Darian Bowers. Talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen him. You've had him as a guy. I mean, he's a really good runner, and if you can take Larry Nichols out of running for Bowie, I think you got to give Bowers a little bit more. And I think now that this week is a little bit of a less competitive game, you're going to run your running back a little bit more. So I think he can get me 120 to 150 this week.
Well, this is the closest I get to giving out flowers. I'm giving my flowers to Dylan Brockle against Aubrey because of what he did last week. If they're going to give him to him half that amount, even if they give it to him 30 times instead of 41, he should pile up the yards. That guy's a tough diesel-type player. Reminds me of John Riggins. The diesel, give him the rock, as long as he's not beat up from last week, which he may be, and then we'll use your little injury clause. I'll pick somebody else later on. All right, wide receiver, you actually would have got – no, he caught the pass. They did a halfback option in that game, but I guess he was the one who caught it. He didn't throw it. But you're going with Luke Watkins for your receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I just on that case that Lovejoy hasn't figured out their offense, and we all of a sudden are going to offensive fire or figure out the defense. Luke Watkins has been great all year. He's been money all year, and even if they do figure things out, I'm thinking second half yardage, they're going to have to throw the ball, nonstop. And Luke Watkins, who better than Luke Watkins to catch me 150 to 200 yards?
There you go.
He's my guy, by the way. He sends me highlights on Facebook,
Does he really?
on Twitter. So, yeah.
Okay, well, you're giving extra flowers.
He doesn't complain about it like Damian Long does. He doesn't complain about bobbleheads. But he's the kind of player who probably deserves a bobblehead too. 1,000 yards.
I wish I could give out more than 15 a year, but I can't. That's just the way it is. Everybody gets bobbleheads. That's the way it goes. Maybe
we should start having campfire bobbleheads. You go to your budget meeting and start having some campfire bobbleheads. So then you can give your big names their guys on TV, and then we can give that next tier of players who are not going to be the college recruits but have big numbers, kind of like Plano East Travis Agee, who is the second behind Legend Bay in rushing, but because he's not offered by Clemson and Georgia yet, he has no place on your TV show.
No place. Unbelievable. Although we will be at the game this week, so he'll have a place there if he can score. I'm going with Damian Crow, the former Berkner receiver now. Is the main athlete over there at Richardson, and see what he can do for me and get me some points. That'd be great. By the way, do 52.
Don't trust Jesuit.
No, I don't trust Jesuit. I trust it. I saw their defense play. I don't trust them to stop this guy. Do your quick math in your head. 130 times 52. That's how much money I'm going to be paying for these bobbleheads that you've now agreed to go through the whole campfire and basically going the whole year long.
6,500.
6,500. Well, I guess I'd take it. I'd take 1% of your salary that we pay you and pay off the bobblehead. I appreciate that. All right, Dixie, we did it, guy. We got through this.
Or you could cancel one game in your trades to Bally's and just do a 3-for-2 ratio, and all of a sudden, we're back in, baby.
We're back in the mix.
In the mix.
See what we could do. All right, brother. I appreciate it. We will see.
People love bobbleheads, Ward. Like, you can't make it so exclusive. You gotta be inclusive.
There's only one person that ever didn't like a bobblehead. It was the first one I ever gave out.
We could interview them for the campfire. It could be like a whole segment because, you got this 20-minute package that you're making for each week. Have a nice little 5-minute interview with their, maybe a little mini bobblehead instead of the big bobblehead. Maybe get you down to $80 instead of $150. Maybe less facial detail or something. I know bobbleheads were featured on College Game Day this week. Just think if we had more bobbleheads, we got more exposure, Ward. It's a marketing expense.
How about my man Dixie there? Give him a little bit of power here to pick some games for me this week, and now he's trying to take over the whole show. This dude is crazy. He's been bullying me since day one. All right, guy, I'm out of here. I will talk to you next week.